Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rock and Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies. We got some shirts. We got some tanks coming up. We got some booty shorts. We got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rock and Horror.
Horns up. Fangs out. Oh, Devil, my friend, you should have known better than to disturb this one. This is going to be fun conversation, my friend. This is a movie I've always loved. I know, that you're familiar with it and you dig it as well. But I'm a fan of the overall franchise of this in classic franchise, fashion. Kind of a drop off as you go into more of those movies. But I've always liked this movie, and as always, voted on by the fans, the Fangs, the Infernos. Let's get into our next alphabet of horror, as it's time for you and I to take a P. To discuss the letter P. Pumpkinhead, my friend. A little bit of Lance Hendrickson in our lives. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, man. I've always been a huge Pumpkinhead fan. It's always one of those cool characters. Even when I was playing D&D back in the day, I always had a character named Rawhead Rex. And I had a pumpkin head, you know what I mean? So it was always fun to have that. And my Rawhead Rex was actually was a Minotaur, breed character. Pumpkinhead guy was I don't know, he was just a regular magician guy, but he wasn't a Pumpkinhead dude. But yeah, this is kind of like the precursor to I would say maybe this could be he could be the Faja of the little one from Trick or Treat. Little Sam could be Sam's daddy, and who knows what's going on in the pumpkin patch.
Yeah, man. When Pumpkinhead is all kind of curled up like fetus style, there is some Sam's head outside of the burlap sack similarities to it for sure. So that could be something down the line, even if it doesn't go as far as being an official major cinematic release. Some of these filmmakers, man, some of these fan films are definitely pretty cool, and they've got some skill when it comes to that. So that would actually be something kind of cool, seeing little bitty Sam Pumpkinhead kind of morph into the actual Pumpkinhead. But yeah, dude, I've always loved this movie. Shout out to our friend Johnny Shivers and his band Sonic Creeps. They have actually done a Pumpkinhead song, as have, the beloved Misfits. They did a song about the Pumpkinhead movie as well. So when it comes to horror punk, Pumpkinhead has definitely been, well represented, in that musical genre. But this movie's cool, man. I've always liked this movie. There's little tweaks, there's tricks, there's, inadequacies about this movie, but overall, I've always loved this movie. I think it's a cool, simplistic concept where, you watch, it starts from back in the day where, Pumpkinhead is chasing down someone, and almost kind of like, The Strangers or The Purge, the parents of the family in this place, they kind of know better than to let this guy into their house. And their son sees Pumpkinhead, out through his window, little Ed Harley, played by TMS alumni, actually. V&D alumni, Chance Michael Corbett, actually. Yeah. So Laddie. Little Laddie playing little Ed Harley. So it's kind of a cool little precursor to the fact that when Ed Harley's grown up and when tragedy strikes, which we're about to discuss, he's already aware of this. It's like, yes, he still kind of has to get tipped off as to where to go and what to do, but it's not something he's completely unfamiliar with because it's something he saw back in his childhood.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the cool thing about this too. Like I didn't even realize while watching this, and then like I said, when I was doing my little diligent diving in and finding out stuff like that, you find out not only do you have Lance in the Lance Henriksen in this movie. I mean, come on, everybody knows him from Aliens and shit like that. You like you said, you got little laddie playing the little version of him when he was a kid, but you also have this cool dog that kind of plays in this movie throughout the whole time, and didn't even realize that it's actually the same dog as freaking Gremlins, and the same
Gremlins.
dog from Gremlins. I'm like, dude, that's pretty cool. That not only this dog is played with little gizmos and Stripe and all the bad guys. He's also played with a little Pumpkinhead, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, I've always liked this movie. I think it's just a cool movie. It's one of those ones where it's like, it's got that kind of feel like Pet Cemetery kind of feel to it, where something goes wrong. This boy gets accidentally killed, which is like one of the weakest kills to a kid, I think, in any series. I mean, come on, at least in Pet Cemetery, Gage got smashed into pieces. Well, I mean, in the book, he got smashed into pieces, but he still got pretty mangled in the movie, and all these other stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's like the thing these motorcycles just barely tapped this kid, and he's like, ugh, and
yeah, dude, he gets like hip checked by it.
Yeah, that's like, come on, man. Like if the kid flew like, I mean, I know he's little, but the kid flew like 30 or 40 feet, or got like completely like just decimated and ran over, I can understand it. But like, yeah, even remotely, even like I said, a little kid, I'm not saying he wouldn't get hurt. He definitely would get hurt. He probably maybe break something, maybe get some bumps and bruises. But he's definitely not going to die from that weak ass motorcycle hip check.
At least have him like, if you're going to keep it like that, at least have it something that kind of makes sense for a young child, like have him hit his head on a rock.
Yeah, yeah. Or like, like it's like, it's a little hill. Maybe all of a sudden when he comes down, the motorcycle lands on him or something like that. It was definitely like that, but I thought it was funny. It's cool. And then it's like, then going into some of my gripes already early, I mean, you have that, and it's like, okay. And then, Lance comes back and he's like, what the hell did you do to my kid? Oh, man, yeah, get out of here. You guys didn't freaking pay attention. I'm like, if he didn't care about your kid, yeah, it was an accident. Why the hell would he have stayed there the whole entire time, like waiting for you to come back or waiting for his friends to get the ambulance, which, obviously the bad guy in this wasn't going to allow him to do it. But the one guy stayed there the whole entire time, be like that. So it wasn't like, Lance plays it off like, oh, these kids ran over my kid and left and didn't give a fuck. And it's like, that's not exactly how it happened. Yes, these kids did kill your kid. Whether or not it was an accident or not, which definitely was an accident. But you know what I mean? Like at least the one guy stayed. He was like, you didn't just leave. It's not like you just drove back to your shop and where's my boy? And then all of a sudden you see him on the ground and there's nobody around. Then it's like, okay. But it's like, yeah, that part always make me like, what the hell, man? Like, yeah, I get it, like it. Yeah. Then, he goes and he talks to, some rednecks in the country and the people and like, hey, man, I need to find out about, the old pumpkin, I need to find the witch. And they're like, oh, no, yeah, we don't want to talk to no witches. But, little kid's like, hey, man, I know where the witch is. Give me some money.
No, absolutely. Like, and allows him to go see Haggis. Shout out to the late Florence Schaeffler, which is unfortunate. We lost her about 8 or 9 years ago, and I always wanted to meet her. So that was always one of my I don't remember offhand doing a con that she was at. Doesn't mean that she wasn't there. But yeah, that's one of those unfortunate situations where I'm kind of like, nuts. That one bums me out. But also the likelihood is that she never was at those cons, simply because when she did pass back in 17, she was 97. So,
Yeah.
she would have been, by the time that I was doing cons like consistently, like, don't get me wrong, I've been doing them, 20, 25 years. But even if I cut that in half, like, she's still in, mid 80s by the time, I'm doing cons like full throttle and stuff like that. So, but that would have been pretty cool. But yes, anyway, Ed Harley goes out to find Haggis, who allows him to be able to summon Pumpkinhead, tells him where to go to dig him up, to bring him in so she can sacrifice a little bit of his blood in a very strangely upside down way of blood coming out of a knife, I guess. But still, sacrifice a little blood to bring out Pumpkinhead, but also gives him the warnings, but doesn't really give him the warnings where it's like, look, you need to understand what you're unleashing, because yeah, he's going to go after your enemies. He's also going to kind of go after anybody who's just in his way. And definitely didn't come with a very clear disclaimer of how to stop Pumpkinhead either. But when Pumpkinhead is summoned, I mean, there's some cool, there's some cool kills when it comes to Pumpkinhead doing Pumpkinhead things. I always kind of felt bad for the first kill, because I was like, oh man, doesn't that just kind of go figure that the guy who tried to do right by everybody is the first one to just get killed by Pumpkinhead in the revenge scheme? It's like, you kind of feel like he should be a final person, or at least somebody who kind of makes it pretty far. But now they're like, you know what? We're just gonna have the sinner kill the saint.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like that Green Day song. Nice guys finish last.
Yeah,
Good guys in horror movies get killed first.
good
So
guys.
note to self. If you accidentally run over a kid with your motorcycle, and you want to wait for help, don't do it, because if you do, Pumpkinhead's gonna kill you first. Even
Yeah,
though you're not the guy who did any of the bad shit to begin with. But that's the warning. But yeah, I mean, when Pumpkinhead comes out, man, I've always loved this look. I love Pumpkinhead. I love the whole super tall, super long legs, that lanky kind
yeah,
of alien Pumpkinhead. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the guy behind the mask, which was Tom Woodruff Jr., who's people who don't know who he is, that is Creature from the Monster Squad. And
yep,
then also, all the special effects in this movie were done, and the movie was directed by Stan Winston, which is like, the huge freaking, mecca of all, like, anything special effects and, creature effects is Stan. So as I always thought Pumpkinhead was just a cool look. You know what I mean? It's so iconically, and just the way that he just goes, and he's kind of, like I said, he's got that kind of alien, xenomorph kind of look feel to him a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I always love it. And like I said, yeah, the kills, man, he just doesn't give a fuck. He just grabs people by their heads and chucks them and hangs them up on trees and
yeah.
just throws them over houses and shit. He's like, I don't give a fuck who you are. I'm Pumpkinhead, and I'm gonna crush some motherfuckers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, dude, when he just, my favorite kill of the ones that he does is when he just fucking basketball palms that chick's head, just making her kiss the glass, and then just forces her head through the window.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, that's just the way. But it's so wild, because I mean, it and there's weird kind of there's continuity issues also a little bit when it comes to the way that, as much as I love Pumpkinhead, it's a bad edited movie. But it's mostly because when you, and I'm saying this as a, you got to know what you're doing, but not because I'm trying to be a dick. It's just the best way to say this. When you've got real practical effects and CGI is just really not a thing, which it wasn't back then, you really need to know what you're doing when it comes to the editing, because the way they kind of jump from Pumpkinhead to cast members to kills to collective to both and such, it has a slight choppy feel to it, and sometimes it makes it a little difficult to follow exactly what the characters are doing, because the editing isn't the smoothest. Doesn't take away from my overall enjoyment. I mean, you and I have already said it 5 times how much we love this movie, and shit, I'll say it 5 times more before we're done probably. Love this movie. But there's definitely weirdness when it comes to like the flow. So you really have to be down for the ride, but it has that great, stormy night, demonic, just evil, not raining, but just that feel of like lightning crashing and thunder going off kind of feel to it, as Pumpkinhead's just going straight through. As Ed develops his own thoughts where he's kind of regretting it, where he's starting to realize that whole shit, what have I done? She warned me, but I was caught up in my rage, in the death of my child. And then it's just kind of a very interesting dynamic where it's like, all right, how can I stop this thing? Because even Ed himself is getting knocked around a bit.
Yeah, it's just like, it's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, he got a little excited in the heat of the moment and decided, to reckon the Pumpkinhead. And like I said, she's like, hey man, are you sure you want to do this? And he's like, yeah. And it's like, okay, why don't you do this shit? Yeah, it's going. And like it's like I said, even the other people in the in the town, and they're banging on the doors. Even when there was a kid, everybody knows that it's like, yeah, once the Pumpkinhead has been summoned, yeah, you don't help anybody, you don't do anything, you just kind of just let Pumpkinhead do what he's meant to do. And it's like one of those ones where, and it's cool. I thought it was a cool concept too, where he kind of feels and sees when Pumpkinhead kills somebody, and he kind of gets that. And then I think ultimately that's what kind of gave him like the clarity about like, oh shit, what did I do? I didn't really want this kind of thing. And it's just like, yeah, but it's like, then again, it's like, yeah, well, I mean, what are you gonna do? And then he's like, oh man, I'm gonna have to fight Pumpkinhead myself. And it's like, dude, yeah, you're immortal. Pumpkinhead is immoral and doesn't give a shit, and he's demonic, and he's whatever he is. He it reminds me of like, especially with movies before, like, you go later on with like Sleepy Hollow and stuff like that, whenever they bring him back, the Headless Horseman back, and you notice that like, he just kind of doesn't give a fuck about anybody else. He's just kind of going on a path where this is sort of the same thing where, yeah, Pumpkinhead is mainly there, but it's kind of weird though too, because it's like, how does Pumpkinhead know who all the bad people are to begin with?
Right.
Because it's like different, like if all of a sudden, you have like, you summon him and you've got like, pieces of this person's hair or something like that that kind of binds them to him, and so he can know, or there's something, because like even in Sleepy Hollow, she's kind of summoning them with something that belonged to them or whatever like that, so that she can use that towards that. And that's the one thing about Pumpkinhead was kind of weird. It's like, yeah, how do you know that? I guess it's just like, okay, the one bad guy is probably in there, they know what house, so we're just going to kill everybody that's in that cabin. And then like you said, like everybody else that's kind of in his way kind of gets killed. But ultimately it's like, I never really kind of understood the direction of like, when she summoned Pumpkinhead, how does Pumpkinhead know exactly who the person's to kill, how many people to kill? Because I'm assuming that like, in the beginning, when you see in the very beginning of the movie, and that guy's chasing when Lance's characters, as a kid, once he killed that guy, Pumpkinhead went back to the patch. So he was only, so it's like this one, it's like, does he just keep killing everybody, or if it's just everybody in the house or anybody that comes to him? There's really no real rhyme or reason to what's gonna start or stop Pumpkinhead from just killing everybody.
No, for sure. And this is kind of the way that I look at it, because also there's a little bit of comedy in some of these kills too. Like one of my favorites is Pumpkinhead just takes the like double barrel shotgun and just epically impales this one fucker with it. Doesn't even pull the trigger, doesn't even shoot them. It's just like, you know what? I'm just gonna run you through. But I'm gonna So my thoughts on the whole, like, how does he know what to do? I'm going to kind of link it with sort of the climactic finish of this movie, which is, you know, Harley realizes basically by snagging his arm on like a nail or whatever, that an injury to himself is how he ties into Pumpkinhead. And and any injuries that he sustains, Pumpkinhead sustains them as well. So while it's never spoken of, never clarified, there's a small part of me that's leaning towards the, you know, Ed knows the kids that killed his kid because, you know, he met them, saw them at the gas station. And that was the thing that was also kind of funny about the hip check of Doom is like, had they just gone the last, like, what, 10 minutes of their drive to where they were going to stay, they could have done their motorbiking out there. But not, the homeboy just had to do it right then. He's like, I like this area. I want to do it here. Yeah, of course, with a, you know, by a building that has a kid running around. But that's neither here nor there. But that's kind of how I'm looking at it a little bit, potentially, is that since Ed knows who was responsible collectively for the death of his child, is maybe the reason why Pumpkinhead knows who to go after and who to attack. And again, yeah, there's still going to be some, you know, some like whatever friendly fire, some casualties just in his wake, wrong place, wrong time. But I just kind of feel that the fact that they're Ed and Pumpkinhead are tied together by blood, and Ed's seen them, knows what they look like, and I guess technically who they are, is the reason why I guess that could be why Pumpkinhead kind of knows who to go after, where to go, and how to find them. But you know, it's never really fully, you know, given out. But you know, Ed decides to do basically the honorable thing, I guess, to a certain degree, which is, you know, hey, I just gotta take myself out, and by taking myself out, I'll be with my son, and it'll be the end of Pumpkinhead, so that more potential, you know, innocent victims won't be killed. But you know, in typical horror fashion, they got to find a way to stretch it out just a little bit longer, and the gunshot does damage, but doesn't do all of it. And you know, Pumpkinhead is still trying to. He's not dead yet. He's trying to do a little bit more, and then you know, the final girl ends up taking out Ed to take out Pumpkinhead. You know, with a little, you know, pum pum bang bang.
Pew pew. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and then and you know, and just like any good villain, you can't keep a good pumpkin down. And unfortunately, I believe that they probably should have kept Pumpkinhead down because all the sequels just got worse and worse and worse. It was crazy because it's. I mean, I get it. I mean, not that Pumpkinhead. I mean, we love Pumpkinhead. You know, the horror fans are that like Pumpkinhead are huge Pumpkinhead fans.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go by any means saying that this is like to the point like Halloween where it made so much money that it made sense to do it. Pumpkinhead never made really any money. It got a decent amount of money on the VHS, rentals at the time and
Yeah,
stuff
that
like
kind of
that.
cult.
Yeah, I think later on, eventually, it got that little cult, like maybe like 10, 15 years later, it got a little bit of that cult status to it. But it never really caught on super big, which was sucked because, like I said, the character of Pumpkinhead was really cool. The look was really cool. The storyline, was kind of cool. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's not the greatest, acting in the movie, and it's not the greatest plot in the movie, but like overall, it's a cool character. It's a cool enough character that like a Jason and Michael Myers and a Freddy and a Chucky, the Pumpkinhead could be potentially a villain that could be possibly on. But yeah, it was just those other ones just it gave you that like, oh man, it's like. And then obviously they made one, and then they like, oh, maybe this one will do good, and then maybe this one would do good. Now there's Pumpkinhead like 72 now or some shit. I don't know. I mean, how many there are, but yeah, it's just
There's four
it did. Yeah,
officially.
they never really got like all those ones were just I don't know, even just the Pumpkinhead itself still just didn't have that awesome and scariness of that first Pumpkinhead. I mean, he was creepy. Like I said, just the way that they lit him and the way that he was, the tallness of him, the big, like the lanky long arms and everything. He was just a cool character that, like, I wish that, somebody, when they did continue on with the series, that they would have put investment in writing. Like I said, not that the first movie was a masterpiece, but it's Shakespeare compared to the other ones.
Yeah, no, definitely Devil 100%. Like it's one of those things where like it was on a level of success from the first movie that I can understand, and as a Pumpkinhead fan, I didn't hate that there was a second one, because it's kind of that it reminds me a little bit of like the Halloween, where, don't get me wrong, it's like you addressed, but I'm specifically talking Halloween 1 and 2. We all know that, the original plan for Halloween was 5 completely separate movies that had nothing to do with each other. But the the unexpected success of the first Halloween is what led to Halloween 2. So I feel like with Pumpkinhead, there was enough overall success and, just enjoyment from that first one, that the fact they did a second one didn't shock me. But like, I think the third and fourth ones, I think were both like made for TV movies. And that's where it's just kind of like, look, that's when you're squeezing blood from a stone. Like, you should have left it at 2. Pumpkinhead's solid enough as its own movie. It could still just be its own thing and have been left that way, and I'd love it just as much. I enjoy that I've got multiple Pumpkinheads depending on my mood, but I'm not going to pretend that I, on any consistent basis, go to the third and fourth ones, past the second one. I'll pop the second one in periodically when I'm just kind of like feeling frisky and stuff like that. I like it okay. It's not without its charm. But man, the third ones are the third and fourth are definitely, you can tell that they're like sci-fi movies. And sci-fi's had some good ones. They're not all trash. They definitely have had their moments. But yeah, those 2 Pumpkinhead, straight to DVD or TV movies, whatever they were. Yeah, definitely not exactly the strongest movies. I think that's safe to say all the way through. But let's talk a little bit about the obituaries, my friend. Alphabets of Horror, letter P, rocking out with Pumpkinhead. Here's the thing. In my heart, it's a high movie. I enjoy the movie quite a bit. I consistently like to watch it. It's not a weekly thing or a monthly thing, but I definitely watch Pumpkinhead, a couple of times a year, maybe even in that ballpark of a few times a year, like maybe around 3, sometimes 4, but it really just kind of depends on how I'm feeling, when my monster mood strikes. In my heart, it's a high ranking movie, but in reality, it's just not. I have a hard time putting this movie where I feel it needs to be for the common populace, in that kind of 6.5 range. But I love the story. I love Lance Hendrickson. I think the Ed Harley character is great. The fact that, the movie itself ties in not only with a band that I truly love and that's important to me, but also it ties into a good friends band is just pretty cool too. So, I give it an extra half point on that. And I just feel like my happy place where I can talk to people about the issues this movie has on a common plane with why I like the movie above what I'm giving it. So, Devil, honestly, I'm going to give it a 7.0. I'm going to give it a solid 7 for this movie. I enjoy it consistently, and it allows me to swing down and be like, look, in reality, we know it's got these issues. But also, an enjoyment factor is why I like it up here in my heart. So, for me personally, 7's just where I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree too. It's one of those ones where, like you said, theoretically and in my heart, yeah, I'd love to give it a lot more movie, especially like I said, between that and like Rawhead Rex. I mean, Rawhead Rex had its problems, and even freaking Clive didn't like it and everything. But I still love it, as horrible as it is. So it's like, same thing with Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead is always gonna have that love in my heart. But yeah, I agree with you on that. Plus, it's like, like I said, to me, I think it just, out of all the monster movies, like, I wouldn't go as far as saying that, Pumpkinhead is as iconic as Aliens, like I was talking about the
Yeah.
Aliens, but just that visual of how Pumpkinhead looks is iconic.
Yeah.
It's just a cool monster that, that no matter whether or not like the movies or not, it's just a cool concept art of like this freaking just deranged big alien type monster with the big head, pumpkinish style, and long arms and legs, and it just has that cool like essential of like what a good monster
Yeah.
should be, like, especially for like television, you know what I mean, that good visual monster. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there. I mean, it's got its faults. Like I said, granted, I'm a huge Lance fan, so I mean, he can pretty much be in any movie, and I'm still just gonna watch it no matter what he's doing. So I'm all cool with that. Like I said, the fact that we got not only him in it when he was a kid, we got Laddie from Lost Boys in it. And the bonus of having Poochie from Gremlins, which is just a movie that's just etched in my heart, and like I watched gazillion times, so it's cool
Yeah.
to see, like, oh yeah, man. So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. Like I said, I definitely would love to give it a higher rating, but I think 7.0 is a pretty good good effort for Pumpkinhead.
Absolutely. So there it is, Fangs and Infernos, etched in stone for all of eternity, per the devil and vampire. We are given alphabets of horror for letter P, Pumpkinhead, a 7.0 on the obituaries. As always, make sure that you guys are going out and supporting all of our beloved, sponsors and partners of the Vampire and Devil podcast. Get your tea on with Brutalities, your spices on with Coney Island Saucery, and make sure that you're supporting the awesome museums of Salem and Baltimore and their respective witchboard museums as well. And that's just to name a few when it comes to our partners. But as always, looking stylish, looking spooky, Rockin' Horror. Rockin' Horror Apparel is the only place that you can get official Vampire and Devil merch. So make sure that you're checking out our friends Mark and Lizzie with what they do. Go to the Vampire and Devil collab under rockandhorror.com and get yourself some spooky swag. Horns up. Bangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin, where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Sarah and Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape Munster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you Fangs and Infernos are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh, yeah.
Devil, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
I think if there's anybody who would know hot things, it's you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's only right that you let our beloved Fangs know what they can order now, courtesy of Coney Island.
Oh, yeah, man. We're in the kitchen. You know it gets hot in the kitchen. And what else better for your finger foods, for your tacos, for your victims that you may be eating? Maybe some sauce. And you should get it from the sauce boss. Coney Island sauce. Oh, yeah. Get some of that good stuff. Oh, yeah. You like to sprinkle it on anything. You could sprinkle it on your fingers. Sprinkle it on your toes. Sprinkle it on your hose. Anything you want to sprinkle goes.
Absolutely. We have partnered with Coney Island Saucery. Aaron is fantastic. We really appreciate all the love he's given to the show, and we're very, very pleased and honored to be a part of him. So he's got 4 sauces out of various heat levels to enjoy on all your various foods, but also for anybody who is already following his socials, our socials, or is about to be, newly announced partnership with Slayer.
Slayer, oh yeah.
Coney Island
burning to fire.
Oh yeah, Coney Island Saucery does have a Slayer brand hot sauce coming out very, very soon. And so make sure that you check that out for all your various levels of spice. This is Vampire and the Devil, Coney Island Saucery. Horns up, fangs out. Well, Fangs and Infernos, sometimes I guess you can just never really tell what's going on with a movie. So let's do a brand new Coffin Nails as I tell you about Young Blood, Fresh Meat from 1994. I've decided to expand all of my Coffin Nails coverage to all vampire movies depending on how I feel at any given time. How I felt at any given time when it came to this movie, guess wasn't really very well thought through on my part. So, here's the thing. Concept, interesting enough. Basically, I feel like Steel Panther should be like the intro to this movie with their song Girl from Oklahoma. As young girl from Oklahoma comes out to be an actress, gets sucked into a escort service run by vampires, turned into one herself as she's being hunted / saved by her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, the cowboy she left behind from Oklahoma. Very, very interesting concept, as well as a vampire hunter that he teams with to try to take down the escort service. Ultimately, to avoid the damnation of being a part of the coven, just to find out that they got her boyfriend, who turns her as the climax of the movie. Very, very interesting. Acting is average. Some would call it subpar, but it's definitely not great. I didn't think that the acting was the worst thing in the world, but the bottom line is it's mostly just tits and ass, which, don't get me wrong, it's a movie about vampire escorts. It kind of comes with the territory, so I can't like bitch about it like it was just some horrific crime. But vampiric lore at its very worst, you know, doing kind of its attempt at things. But look, the fact of the matter is it's just not overly that great. It's only about an hour, so don't have to worry about losing your whole day. But the fact of the matter is, Young Blood, Fresh Meat is going to get a 3.5.
Devil, my friend, creepy crawlies, critters, things with multiple legs, things that possibly don't exist. It's going to be a very interesting showdown for us today, my friend. We're going to do a little bit of like creepy crawly bug spiders, you know, insect horror, as some might refer to it. But we're going to have definitely some fun with this. We've got real life insects and real life creepy crawlies, and we've got a little bit of psychological bugs and creepy crawlies. Do they exist or do they not? It's going to be a very interesting showdown, my friends. So let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit of arachnophobia versus bug. Now, for all of our Fangs and Infernos that are, big time horror movie people like ourselves, there are two bugs. There is the OG from 75, which is a traditional, infestation movie. But then I'm going to go into more detail, as will Devil, when we actually break it down. But we are going to be talking about the 2006 bug movie that has Ashley Judd in it. But we will cross that bridge when we get to it. We will let those eggs hatch when we get to it. Let's talk a little bit about Arachnophobia there, my friend. A Jeff Daniels movie. Honestly, it's always been considered a classic. It's a top-tier insect movie. It's always been very highly regarded and just genuinely thought of when it comes to, spiders and infestation movies. But like I said, Jeff Daniels, I'm drawing a blank on her name right at the moment, but I've always been a fan as well of the actress that played his wife, who was also in Necessary Roughness. But very, very cool movie, basically about a big city doctor who moves to a small town in the plans that he's going to take over the local practice as the local doctor is going to retire. The local doctor decides that he's not going to retire quite yet. So now now Jeff is kind of like trapped in this little bit of limbo decision making where it's like, well, now I don't have any patients because I was going to take over the practice. Now he's not leaving, so all of his patients are staying his patients. So I'm just a guy with no clients to make any money off of. But basically, very, very classic premise as it builds up to it. Little deaths here and there, little uneasy moments as it builds to the fact that this small town is becoming is becoming overrun with a bunch of, poisonous spiders that ultimately come from an area very close to Jeff Daniels.
Yeah. I mean, that's the cool thing about this movie. Not only we got Jeff Daniels in it, you got the quirky and comedy of John Goodman as the bug guy, the exterminator dude. He's got like one of the best lines throughout the whole entire movie. And then, it starts off with, in them in like the Amazon and who do we get to see? We get to see, Julian Sands, which is, sad to see now after, with his passing and stuff like that. Watching this, you're like, oh man, it's harder. But first of all, I'm going to inform that we already know this already, but I'm going to ask you anyway and let the Fangs and the Infernos know. This was a movie that I'm 100% sure that you watched without Mrs. Vamp because I know how much she hates spiders.
Nowhere near. Completely at work, not even in the house.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big spider person either. I mean, unfortunately, where I live in this dwelling of the hell cavern that I'm in, it's very, very spidery. I've gotten a lot better now with them as far as like you're just basic like dandy, like freaking daddy long legs kind of spiders. As long as they're not in my face, then I'm good. But yeah, anything that comes to those kind of spiders, especially spiders that are in this movie, hairy, big monsters. No, I mean, I'm sorry, but I know Jeff Daniels' character is supposed to be, have arachnophobia and he's afraid of spiders. He's not that afraid of spiders because with the kind of spiders that he has and he sees, I would have burnt down that house like in the first 5 seconds of the movie.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, Devil. Like back actually when I was watching this movie, like I said, while Mrs. Vamp was at work, she texted me on one of her breaks and was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm just at home. I'm watching Arachnophobia because it's one of the next showdowns that me and Devil are going to be talking about." And she just hit me with a big old like, "Ew." So there was definitely no chance of me getting prepared for this showdown. At least, even though I've watched the movie many times, it's always just good to refresh. There was no chance of me getting a proper refresh if Mrs. Vamp was in the house. So that was definitely not going to be a thing. But I mean, it's always been a cool movie. Like it's definitely, it's an early 90s movie, like literally the earliest of the 90s. It's, you know, it's cool, it's solid. I do think it comes across well. I do personally think it also ages pretty well, because it also is that practical effects, also mixed with real. In fact, a lot of the spiders that were used in this movie, the dead spiders in particular, are actually real spiders that they were able to use for this movie, that weren't killed by bad ways. You know, they're not going to upset any of the animal rights activist people. But you know, I always just think it holds up well. It definitely builds the story. That's really the one thing that is about this movie. Like in, you know, many previous conversations, we talk about the slow burn. I don't think that this movie specifically falls into the category of a slow burn by the traditional definition, but it is a movie that you do have to watch, and you have to kind of watch it play it out. Because don't get me wrong, when the bubble bursts, or when the or when the nest hatches, it's action. Like the end of the movie itself is very fast paced, and you get a lot very quickly, and it's really cool, you know, when they kind of make the discovery and start figuring things out. But you do have to watch the story for this kind of play out, and it's on a different type of level as Bug's going to be, but you really have to watch it. And it's got a very similar, I would say, design to a movie like Pet Sematary, where you have to watch. It's going to build. You're going to get your little like injuries or deaths, even close calls, like with the two girls at the slumber party. You're going to get a good collection of, like, you know, hits and misses, but not in the negative way, to lead up to when they actually start figuring this out. And I like the build up of the movie. I've always thought it was pretty well done.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's cool. Like you were talking about too with the spiders. Like, yeah, that was the interesting finding out. Like, you know, a little bit of the trivia and stuff like that. How they used real spiders, and even in the scenes where, like, John Goodman's character steps on it, they had like a shoe that had a hollow bottom, so that when it goes, it doesn't actually like step on a spider. So everything, like even when the book comes down on it or anything goes on it, everything was all like basically so wouldn't harm any of the spiders, because and then they just kind of used like little little trinkets to get it to move places that they needed it to move. Then obviously there are definitely some the CGI spider, not CGI, but like the practical effects spiders and stuff like that. And then when you get to the big mamma jamma, obviously you can definitely tell it's a animatronic spider and things like that. But I thought it was kind of cool where it's like this kind of like real life spiders. I mean, me personally, yeah, I would have been like, no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can probably muster up enough strength to deal with the animatronic spiders, but I don't even know. I think even a animatronic creepy crawling, big ass spider on my arm, even though I know that it's not real, I probably would still like freak out and flip out on it and stuff like that. But yeah, this movie always kind of did have that feel to it, like that Pet Cemetery kind of feel where it's that countryside, and you're kind of getting into that, and it's got that kind of feel to it. But yeah, I always love it. I mean, it's just a cool movie. It's got a lot of cool kills in it. The spiders take out a decent amount of people throughout the whole movie. It's got, you got people dying left and right throughout this thing. And you kind of feel bad for Jeff Daniels' character, because throughout the whole entire time, every time it seems that he's looked at them as a doctor, someone's died, and they're like, oh, maybe it's this guy. Maybe he's not a very good doctor. He's like, at one point, even like the kids are calling him Dr. Death and things like that. So I always thought that was fun. But then, like I said, you bring in John Goodman's character, which is the he's supposed to be the expert exterminator, and he's just funny the whole entire time. And then he just gets even more crazier when he gets towards the end of the movie, where he's got like double pistol freaking things, and he's killing all these freaking bugs, and then he's got like flamethrowers and shit like that. Like, but yeah, his character is all funny the whole entire time, because he's just like, oh, well, yeah, there's definitely not any spiders, and they're like, well, yeah, I saw the big huge web in my barn, and he's like, well, yeah, a web would definitely definitely a variant for a spider.
It's like,
It's like,
oh
well, no
shit.
shit, they're deep.
Yeah, and he's just full on like fucking Buck Rogers, just John Wayne with this thing. But it's
Yeah.
and just and kind of a nod to one of his other characters. But it's so funny because his exterminator character is genuinely, in my opinion, exactly what you would get if you just squashed John Wayne with Fred Flintstone.
Yeah.
Like, it would be this guy, like where he would just have that like strapped for war kind of thing, just mixed with that like 10-cent brain. And I mean, it's just hilarious when it comes to that. But it's also, there's a lot of like little like intricacies in this movie as well that I like, where it kind of plays a little bit with like how you want to feel too. I think about Jeff Daniels' character, because again, he comes to this small town, he kind of gets screwed by the guy that he was going to replace, and then ultimately the spider, he gets bitten by the original doctor gets bitten by a spider, has a seizure that kills him. Jeff does take over the practice, and at one point you see him in the doctor's office, checking on patients, doing his thing. A lot of people in the waiting room. It seems like life is good, and his wife is like hanging pictures on the walls, and he just kind of walks by her and just kind of gives her that like, fuck yeah. And there's a small part of me that kind of wanted to be like, it's kind of a dick move, dude. I mean, you inherited this off the death of a guy. Even though you were supposed to inherit it just on a simple turnover of it. But I was like, you kind of inherited it by this guy just like suddenly kicking the bucket, and you're kind of like, yeah, my shit now. It made me laugh a little bit. And I know it was never written that way. It was never intended to be that way. And it's more just me kind of like getting a chuckle out of something I looked too deep into. But I just thought it was a little bit funny because it also does have that just classic feeling to it of like, hey, almost kind of like, hey, this down on his luck guy who finally gets a break and is like, cool, life is good. But then, yeah, he ends up calling in the for a doctor who specializes in rare spiders. And, it starts off with his assistant till his assistant's like, dude, you need to get down here. And then they kind of started mapping things out and kind of figuring out things. Honestly, very similar to a movie that we already talked about in Idle Hands, where it was like, well, this lady died here. This young man died on this football field. The doctor died here, and this person died there, and this person died there. And it's like, what's in the middle of this? And that's when Jeff Daniels realizes that that's his house. And he's like, oh my God, the major nest is coming from somewhere on my property. And he believed it to be his barn. Obviously, John Flintstone didn't feel that way about it. But man, when they discovered the hive and discovered the latest victim, which turned out to be the like special spider professional doctor guy, it got really gnarly really fast.
Yeah. When it gets into that, then towards the end of the movie, and you get like Julian Sands' character being killed, and you get the big Bob Spider and stuff like that. They have that big huge, Jeff Daniels has that big fight in the basement and all this other crazy stuff like that. I would have been like I said, when the big guy is coming after you and he's trapped underneath, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I know it is a cool scene and a cool thing where he kind of gets him and he waits for him to kind of crawl up him a minute so that he can get on that board that's loose on him, and he can smack him so he flies, and then he shoots the thing. I'm like, yeah, it's cool and all, but with the way Jeff Daniels' character is supposed to be, and having that that fear of spiders. Yeah, I would have been just dead. I would have been just laying there like, come on, big boy, just come and get me, because I'm not, I can't move. It's like that. It's like a scene that I always laugh about, which I give him straight kudos for it. But you go to the Jackass movie where they stick that big ass snake in the cage with Bam Margera, and how much he hates snakes, but for some reason he fucking like parkours out of that freaking thing so smoothly. And I'm
Yeah.
like, for a dude that's seriously like guys, like this is not cool. Like he hates snakes. Yeah, I'm not a snake person either. I would never have been that slick and that smooth to have got out of there. And that's what that kind of reminded me with that, where it was like, yeah, he made this slick move, and we all would think that we would want to do that. But in real life, other than Bam Majero, we would all be stuck in fear and dying, because there's no way I would have done anything remotely to try to kill that spider, because that dude, that spider at the end is just way too big, and I would have been literally just paralyzed just from fucking saying, nope, sorry.
Yeah,
Just come get me, come inject me, kill me in 5 seconds, I'm done.
it's like those mega spiders you see in Australia that are like the size of like a house, and you're like, nope, I'm burning my house down and collecting the insurance money. I will find a way to be right in that.
Yep.
No, this is my way. And that's the thing too. It's like, it's one thing to it's one thing for the scene when the spider's crawling up him and walks onto the board, and Jeff is able to just kind of flip him into a fire. Like, I'll give you that one, despite the fact that I would definitely be like, oh my God, this giant thing is coming to bite me and kill me. That would be tough enough. I'm like, there's a small part of me that's like, I feel like I could muster up that. But when that final jump scare happens and that spider engulfed in flames is running at him and then jumps at him, and he shoots the little air spear gun thing and impales him right into the hive, and he like explodes and the hive is like burning, that's not happening. When I see that thing running at me and then that thing take flight towards me, I'm not shooting that thing with a fucking spear gun. I'm just accepting my fate.
I'm shooting myself with the spear gun.
Right. Let's just like, nope. I don't want to see or feel this. We're just going straight up, man. This is just going to be how it happens. And then it ends on a little bit of comedy as the family relocates back to San Francisco. Jeff Daniels wins the day, kills the hive. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that everything's cool and whatnot. But for some reason, that's enough of a trauma to be like, dude, fuck the country. And he moves back to San Francisco. And the movie ends with them checking on the kids while a earthquake starts as they're in their giant skyrise type of like apartment. And I'm just like, this guy just can't catch a break. If it's one thing, if it's not being bitten and poisoned to death by killer spiders, it's like dying, 50,000 feet in the air from a high-rise apartment building in an earthquake. It's just like, you got to be kidding.
Yeah, they're kind of like, they're just kind of like, you know what, we'd rather deal with the earthquakes than deal with the big freaking spiders and all the bugs that are in the countryside. So it's kind of funny. They're just like, no. They're like, even when it was a big one, they're like, oh, no, that was a small one. It's all right. Like, they're trying to justify like this earthquake versus like living in the country.
Yeah, it's like, you know what? We're cool with this. We can handle a little shake, rattle, and roll. But let's go check on the kids. just to make sure that everything's good. But Devil, my friend, as we get into the obituaries before we lean into talking about Bug, honestly, I can't do a crazy like deep dive into this movie. Look, it's been around. The movie's 30 years old. Like I still like it as much now as I ever did. I think it's well shot. I think it's well acted. I think the effects work, and I think it's time tested, and I do think it stands up. The problem, not with the movie, the problem just kind of with like the genre a little bit, is the fact that like people go so CGI crazy that like you see all these other movies that involve like, spiders or snakes or lizards, arachnid, just any kind of like creepy crawly type thing. And they're usually just CGI'd to death, where just everything about it is just stuff that you hate. And it's like, I can't handle this kind of thing. But I do like the fact that there was, proper animatronics, proper practical effects, and the fact that they interspliced actual real spiders that were appropriate in the scenes that they were using it for. I think just adds to an overall good movie. Look, it never won any awards. It's not going to win any awards now. But it is a movie that I think, like I said, stands up. And I do think it's enjoyable. And it is a movie that I do circle around a little bit on, more often than I think. When I was looking for my copy to watch is when I realized I didn't have it. But I'd stumbled across it so many times, whether it be on TV, like regular TV, or some of the streaming services, that over all the years I've seen it plenty of times. But I mean, I think it's enjoyable. I always think it's a fun movie, and I give it a solid 7, man.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with you, especially because it's like I said, even though it is an early '90s movie, it definitely doesn't have that feel too much of like, timeless piece, like where you can kind of put it. You can still watch it now and still sort of relate to everything, and everything seems really good. Like, and I agree. Like, I think it's just like, really cool shot. It's a cool story. I mean, yeah, you got to kind of disbelief, a little bit about it. The fact that this spider made it all the way from a different country and flew all the way there. If it's lived out in the middle of nowhere where no one's ever seen it before, and then all of a sudden now it's like commanding all this crazy shit and can do all this stuff like that. But like I said, it's always been a fun movie. It's a good movie to watch. Like, the whole after you watch it, you're just like constantly like, okay, are there any spiders around or what like that, and try to go to sleep at night, and you're getting having dreams of arachnids coming after you, especially like towards that end when they get all the spiders that are coming and attacking them, and they're just there's like thousands of them coming through the walls and through the TV and through underneath. And you're like, yeah, fuck this. That's what I said. I would have just burnt that. I would have burnt the house with me even inside of it. I wouldn't even give a shit. I'd be like, whatever, man. Like, fuck you, spiders. You're not taking me. We're taking each other.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with it. I think it's a fun movie. It's one of those ones that it's got a very good, repeating, watching it over often as much as you can. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I think I think it's a 7 is a pretty solid score for Arachnophobia.
Absolutely, man, for sure. So Fangs and Infernos, we're starting it off nice and strong. We got Arachnophobia at a 7.0 per Vampire and the Devil. But we're going to get into the Devil's pick now, and we're going to fuck with your brain a little bit. Devil, my friend, Bug, Ashley Judd, early 2000s. And the fun thing about this, when I pulled it off my shelf to watch it, is I got a little hit of nostalgia because the cover, the jewel case that it was in, I didn't realize I'd had this movie in my collection as long as I did because it was a Blockbuster video case. So I bought this movie back when I used to bin dive all up into those like great, 3 for 15, 4 for 20 deals that Blockbuster Video used to have. But yeah, man, early 2000s, Bug with Ashley Judd. Let's fuck with your brain a little bit, my friend.
Yeah, I always liked this movie. Like I said, I know, like, yeah, some people would normally look, like I said, I didn't even realize that there was another Bug movie, an OG Bug movie from the 75 that was about infesting cockroaches and things like that. And you would think that I would pair that very well with, with Arachnophobia, with us talking about phobias and stuff like that. But there's something cool about this movie, though, even though ideally, even the guy who wrote about it said that, there really aren't any bugs in this movie. I just love the fact that it makes you go crazy even when you watch this movie. Like I said, a lot of people who haven't seen this movie before, I just it's a cool premise. I mean, it's basically Ashley Judd is kind of just living off the grid, and she's kind of just doing things and working at a bar. And you got Michael Shannon's character, which I love. Michael Shannon, apparently he this was once a play, and he was the actual actor in the original play at the time too. So I thought that's kind of cool. He reprised his role, but he's kind of like this like loner guy. Then eventually you find out he's a little bit of like a, was a an ex-military person who had mental issues, maybe some post-traumatic stress disorder kind of stuff, and very borderline schizophrenic, with all that kind of stuff. So, it basically comes down to where he thinks that he sees a bug on him real quick. and then it just escalates into more and more. And like I said, it's definitely a different kind of vibe in this movie versus like Arachnophobia, because this movie is, again, very limited cast. It's more strictly just mostly throughout this whole entire movie, you're in one setting, which is this apartment complex, building that they're in. And yeah, it's just one of those ones that, yeah, it's got a little bit of that slow burn into it, and it's got that thing like that. But I just loved it because it's just a psychological movie that, like, the whole time you're watching this movie and you seeing these guys like freaking out, and eventually we'll get into the more of the paranoia, that it kind of gets into your brain where all of a sudden you start feeling little things on you, and you're like, then you start freaking out and shit like that too, and you're like, oh my god, do I got bugs now or something like that? It's just a crazy movie that, like, when it gets into even going more deeper and more crazy, and they're going into the deeper crazy and madness, it kind of brings you into their creepy madness, where it's like, is that a bug there? Did I see something? Maybe I saw something. Maybe you start joining their paranoia, and that's what I always liked about this movie, because it's like, it's not, it's not your normal traditional film, but I just loved it because it's literally just such a great, story of like people who would just have phobias, and or just not even really phobias, just like this, mental disorders with schizophrenia and things like that, we're not really being there. It's just a fun movie, and it fucks with you. And like I said, every time I watch this movie, I always I love watching it, but I always dread watching it, because I know while I'm watching it and for the next couple of days watching it and going to sleep, I'm gonna have things in my head thinking there are bugs all around all the time, and I'm gonna be joining the crazy madness of this movie.
No, for sure. And it's a really cool movie. Again, yeah, it's that slow burn feel, like you said, but it's got a story to tell, which is something I definitely appreciated about this movie. You got Ashley Judd's character, who's basically this broken woman who just doesn't have a lot of money. Things really aren't going her way. Or, her ex-boyfriend, like ex-husband, is finally getting released from jail, but she's just kind of this broken, like, impressionable woman. Her husband comes back into the scene, like comes back, into her life, and he's just as much of a dickhead douche as he's always been, and lays hands on her, and just despite the fact that people have needs, and they take care of those needs, it doesn't change the fact that, like, it's not a good environment for her. He's just terrible, and she breaks it off completely, so to speak. And then that's what kind of brings in this, like, drifter relationship, where she kind of gets the feels for this ex-military guy, but at the same time, even when he starts having those issues, she's not really on board right away. She's just kind of like trying to, like, do right by him and console him and make sure that everything's okay, but she's really not on board for this whole, like, bugs theory thing. And it also, like, shows the delicacies of just, like, mental health in general, because not only is it about, like, feeling like there's bugs everywhere, bugs in your house, bugs in your food, bugs in your teeth, which was absolutely crazy. It also deals with that, like, being spied on by the government feel. And when we look at that, it's like, there have been shows like The Simpsons and other stuff that have even touched base on that same kind of thing. Like, the government's always monitoring us, or, hey, there's always these kind of critters around. But it really comes at you, like, full force as she starts to, like, really believe and get into it. And the fact that they, refuse to leave the house. People are trying to come in and check on them. The doctor, who knows that this military guy is a nutcase, frankly, is trying to let her know, and she's like, no, like, my love for him is too strong. It really is. This really is a thing. And the doctor's like, no, it really isn't. And ultimately, the doctor ends up getting killed, and everything just starts kind of crashing down around them as their paranoia grows, and they're hanging, it goes from papers and sticky traps to actual bug zappers to tin foil around the room. At one point, they have a pizza delivered to them because they're starving and they want to dive into the pizza, but then they're like, no, we need to microscope this. We got to make sure that no bugs came in with this, or it hasn't been infestated, or the delivery guy wasn't trying to poison us. And you could hear the poor delivery guy on the other side of the door. They're like, well, here, we need our pizza. And he's like, well, look, dude, you got to pay for it. They're like, okay, what's it come out to? $15. And, you know, they slide the money through the slot like Home Alone style. And he's like, do you need anything else? She's like, no, just leave it. We're good. Goodbye. And he's just like, okay, whatever. Bye. Getting away from you, crazies. And despite the fact he doesn't know just how crazy it is, but it's a really crazy film, especially when it gets into like the last third of the movie, when I loved the effects they were using on the lighting, where it wasn't even just about, you know, daylight and light bulbs or just anything in general, or moonlight. It was, you know, this greeny, the blue, the silver glows from like the bug zappers and the tinfoil and all that. Just a really, really cool, like, overall shot and edited movie as like the paranoia grows leading up to the climactic finish, which was definitely gnarly.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty cool. And like you said, when they were like, you know, first started getting into the more paranoia and stuff like that with the, like you said, the fly traps. It's just funny because you see, anybody who's ever lived anywhere, there's a lot of flies, and you do have the fly traps, or even like in, these, redneck horror films where you have the fly traps hanging all over the house. You usually see them, and you see them covered with tons and tons of bugs and or flies and all that stuff. It was just weird because it's all these bug traps, all these like fly traps, nothing on them. It's just like, it gets so weird. And like I said, yeah, he just starts going into it, starts cutting up his skin, and then he starts, one scene he takes off his shirt, he's got all these marks, and they're like, oh my god, they're like, oh yeah, that's what it is. They get underneath your skin, and he's like trying to microscope it, look at, like in the microscope and see all the stuff. He's like, oh, you see the bug? And like I said, she starts getting into it. Yeah, I see it now. And like, to the point, like you said, when starts getting really, really gnarly, he thinks he's got a bug in his tooth because he's had this toothache. He just freaking takes the pliers and just yanks the shit out of it freaking tooth, and then he puts it under the pliers, and he goes, and then she looks and goes, oh my god. It's like, it's cool because it didn't, in the movie there, at one point, the director of this film was asking the guy who wrote it and did the play. He was like, hey, for the movie part of it, do we want to show some bugs? And he was like, no. The whole point is, in the guy who wrote this, there was never any bugs.
Yeah.
It's just completely just that paranoia. And, once you start thinking about it and you start getting, it's just like anybody else, man. Somebody coughs or yawns, you yawn. Somebody itches, you kind of itch. And it's like, adds on to that where, like, yeah, he's really crazy. She's kind of like impressionable, but she does, like I said, she does not really, and to the point where they're both completely engulfed in this like belief that there's these micro bugs that the government are doing them, and with a helicopter flies by, they're making the at one point in the movie, and it's so cool that they shoot it both ways, because you have the ex-boyfriend, which I love, is the Harry Connick Jr. I was waiting for him to ask for some squirrel covers.
Yeah.
Got the squirrel covers, but he's such an asshole in this movie. But like, even in one scene where they're doing that, they're showing like the house kind of rumbling and there's lights and stuff like that, but then he's knocking on the other side of the door, and it's daylight and nothing's happening outside, and then it goes back in the house where it's lights and flashes, and it basically just shows you, like, once you're inside this house, you're kind of trapped in their paranoia, so it's making you see how what they see, to the point, yeah, like the whole entire house is like tinfoiled, and it's insane. And then gets to the climax of the movie where they like they kill the doctor. They're like, oh man, they're gonna come and get us. That they stick all this jet ski fuel and just literally just douse themselves in it and kill them, burn themselves. It's so insane. And, especially, like I said, especially in like, when you go to those kind of chemicals, kind of like, when like meth labs and stuff like that explode. That's what's cool about this movie. Because like, it has that scene where they kind of light themselves and it just goes boom quick. 'Cause you got to realize all that fuel plus all that tinfoil and all that is just basically an accelerator, and there's no real way for anything to go. And yeah, it's just all of a sudden just goes boom. I mean, it's like it's burning a lot of shit, and the whole entire time you're like, holy fuck. Yeah, it's just a crazy movie. I just always loved it. I love but I also love like in one aspect too, it is a love story. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, she's sad. He's kind of lonely. Even at one point, he said that he's not really into women, and she's like, "Well, are you gay?" And he's like, "No, I just people do something like that." And he's like, "I don't even want to sleep with you." And then eventually gets to the point where they're like, maybe I would, and they do, and they have this like awkward sex, and she's like, "Yeah, it's so weird," but then it's like, "Oh, you were good," and it's kind of like these two, misfits that the world doesn't like. You have his character who's got a lot of mental issues and things like that, and her character of this, dating these guys who probably are not the best people in the world, and that she's been with her ex-husband and all that stuff like that. And the fact that they talk about in the movie that she lost her child, that she was like on a some shopping like center, and her kid got kidnapped. So you have that extra trauma and depression from that, and then these two people can kind of collide together and be together, and they want to be together, but then you mix it in with the paranoia of all these bugs and stuff like that. It's a weird, it's a weird movie because it just has like all that combinations, but it's so well acted. I just love the two of them together throughout this whole entire movie. And like I said, I'm a huge fan of Ashley Judd to begin with, and Michael Shannon. So it's like, it's just so perfect. It's such a weird movie. It's kind of like one of those ones like when we did it earlier with the Cube and stuff like that. It's one of those
Yeah.
ones that a lot of people might not know about, and maybe haven't seen it yet. And it's like, I always implore people like, yeah, watch it, man. It's just, you want to see a really cool, gnarly, well written, well acted film that deals with some weird and crazy subjects, and with psychological mental issues and things like that. Such an awesome movie.
No, for sure. And the one thing that I do think might be a little tricky on this, just make this my closing point before we go into the obituaries, is like it's a little oddly titled. And it's not that it's wrong. It's just kind of like how we talked about earlier, where there's no actual insects in this movie. But it does take advantage of kind of that double entendre, though, where yes, there's this paranoia of these bugs being in his skin, in his teeth, and in his food, but it also doubles as kind of that, did the government put like a bug in your brain, like a tracking device on you kind of a thing. So especially with him being a military guy, having that mental unstableness, but coming from a government position, it's kind of a very, very interesting thing there. But I do feel like this movie potentially has a little bit of a hurdle to get over when it comes to the title, depending on the sensitivities. I don't mean sensitivities on whether or not the fangs are like, sensitive to what the movie's about. I just mean based on how they like their movies to go and what's being shown to let them know, like, hey, well, this is what I was expecting from this type of movie, kind of a thing. So it's a little tricky, I feel, on the title. But don't get me wrong, I'm not taking that away, because the title does work. The title does fit. I just think it's a little tricky. Like, for example, where we were talking earlier, I was like, I have copies of both movies, and they sit obviously right next to each other on my shelf. But you get like the one movie that you pull that you clearly see like these cockroaches running around right on the jewel cover. And then you get this one, which is more of this paranoid look of Ashley's character. So it's a little interesting when it comes to that. But I do think that, when you get into it and you get into the story, obviously everything will make sense when it comes to the title. And again, it really just builds up to that epic finish, along with the fact that, man, not no pun intended, the movie goes out on a bang, but also it ends. Like they don't do any little final anything. They don't show any burned bodies or a burnt down room or the ex-husband wondering things. It literally just ends on that note, which is pretty crazy. So, it leaves the devil with a little bit of devil skin to close out the movie with a fiery inferno, brother. But let's jump into the obituaries, my man. Right to you. How do you rank Bug?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've always loved this movie. I just think it's a cool movie. Like I said, I'm hugely infatuated with both of the actors, Ashley Judd and Michael Shannon, so it's like that. And like I said, with this one, yeah, I kind of, I kind of did what I normally do. We did an Alien movie. I did Under the Skin, which was kind of like not what you would typically think of an Alien movie, but it kind of fits. The same thing with this. This is our phobia one, and yeah, everybody has phobias of bugs. Where, yeah, you could do a bunch of cool bug movies. There's tons and tons of good bug horror films that are out there. But I was like, what, I like this. It's kind of like it's kind of like a, haha, you thought you were gonna get bugs. Well, there are bugs, but are there bugs? Maybe they're not bugs. Are they real bugs? Are they infested bugs? And that's the cool thing about that. You really don't know.
Yeah.
Throughout that, and they don't really show you anything, so you don't know, were they really infested with these bugs? Was there any kind of government conspiracy of these bugs? I mean, we're assuming not, because like I said, with the paranoia of the house shaking and things like that, and then outside everything's fine, or that and nobody else can see these bugs or anything like that. So we all assume that, that's, like I said, even with the writer saying that, his theory was that there never really was any bugs. It was just these, mental issues of these bugs and stuff like that. So that's why I was like, let's play a little fun on the phobia, where it's maybe a little bit of like schizophrenia phobia.
Yeah.
People mentally issues. People go crazy, and that in itself is a phobia. People have a fear of spiders, fear of snakes, fear of heights. Some people have a fear of losing their mental capabilities with ever it being like dementia or any of that kind of stuff like that, Alzheimer's and those kind of mental issues. So it was like adding to that. And like I said, I've always loved Ashley Judd, and you get to see Ashley Judd naked a little bit, even though and that's what's crazy about this movie. It's funny, you can make Ashley Judd kind of homely looking, and maybe like this kind of like crackhead sort of homeless kind of look towards her, and yet still be hot in this movie for some reason. It's like Charlize Theron when she was in Monster, even though she's playing Eileen Warren, and you're like, oh, but then again, you're like, but it's Charlize Theron. She's so freaking hot. So it's like, yeah, you get that little extra bonus of the devil, the devil's skin, as you said. You get to see a little bit of Ashley's naked body throughout. I mean, and for the ladies, you get to see a little bit of Michael Shannon too. It's not a one-way train. This is a two-way train. You get both guys and girl, frontal nudity action in this film. So, it definitely pleads the way. And like I said, I love it. I love the fact that, they both of these actors just went for it, no holds back. Let's just, especially with Michael Shannon's character being, going off that deep end, man. He just goes full on nuts in this film. So for me, I've always loved this film. It's like I said, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but like I said, I've always loved it. So for me, like I said, I find it a little maybe not as much as to watchable of Arachnophobia, but like I said, you've had so many of those. Like I said, you have so many of these bug movies and things like that, where this movie kind of takes you to a completely different way. It's such an original script, such an original movie. No one's ever done really anything. I mean, there's been movies about people with mental issues and things like that, paranoia and schizophrenia and stuff like that, but never done in a way like this, where it's one setting and it's bugs and government conspiracies and stuff like that. So for me, I've always loved it. So for me, I give this movie a 8.0, mainly because, like I said, 7 maybe for the movie itself, I would say. 7, 0.5 for, the originality and the fact that, no one's really done anything sort of like this. And then that extra bump, because like I said, whether or not you want to see Michael Shannon naked or you want to see Ashley Judd naked, you get a little bit of both. So that's why I give it a little bit of bump for that stuff. So I give it an 8.0.
No worries, Devil. Totally understand that, my friend. I don't quite go that high. We're going to meet in the middle on this one, but I definitely do think it's a solid story. It's in a very original take. Like I said, I really do like the way the film was like shot, like visually, when it came to like the color scheme. I really thought that was very unique. I really dug it because it played into those, like you had said, those scenes where like it shows the real world outside of the quarantine zone, and that everything was normal and nothing bad is happening whatsoever. But it's definitely an original movie. It's definitely enjoyable. For me, for my style, the way I kind of viewed it overall, like I said, I definitely enjoyed it. Well written, excellently shot. But just as a movie, as I'm watching it, it's a good time. It's a movie that I enjoy, but I just kind of see it on the par of a, in a scoring system of a 7.0, which I'm going to give it, just like I score Arachnophobia. So we'll meet in the middle on this one. It'll be a 7.5, which is going to give victory to the Devil on this showdown. While I do think my style, I enjoy Arachnophobia a little more. I enjoy it a little bit more over Bug. They both have their design specialties, which I thought worked very well for both of those movies. But I just think the unique kind of new age, mental health awareness angle of Bug is something that definitely needs to be acknowledged on this. So while I do think personally for my taste and style, I do like Arachnophobia a little bit more than I enjoyed Bug, but at the same, and for the sake of the showdown, Arachnophobia may be stuck a little technically closer to the phobia category, but we still rank the movies based on how we see a movie delivering. And I do think that the points that Bug has, the points that you made, the individual performances, for, the cast is also very important as well. Because you like your mini cast movies more than anybody I've ever known, Devil. But the thing is, it's about how those actors and actresses perform when they don't have those secondary cast members to play off of and possibly even protect their weaknesses. We're big Rob Zombie people. I love all the Rob Zombie movies. Some I need to kind of build my way up to. Others I liked right away. But one of the examples that I use for this is always the way that I felt about Sherry Moon. And I'm by no means pulling punches, trying to be mean. But when I watched Sherry, working in these movies that she did with Rob, and again, we've discussed it on the show. She doesn't want to be an actress. She doesn't want to be considered an actress, but she enjoys it because it's her husband. But when you look at those movies like House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects, 31, ultimately 3 from Hell. When it got to a movie, for example, like Lords of Salem, which we did a showdown for, I've always loved the script of that movie. Loved the way it was designed, loved the way it's shot. But that was the first time that I honestly felt that Sherry didn't have the benefit of all these incredibly seasoned actors around her kind of to protect her, because she was the star of that movie. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking Ken. I'm definitely not knocking Meg. I'm not knocking, Jeff Daniels. I'm not knocking anybody. But when you look at the season design of those movies that involve a Sid Haig, a Bill Moseley, a Ken Foree in that, type of area, as well as, other characters like, like Rainn Wilson in what he does. That's why I kind of mean it like that. So I love the fact that they designed this movie very well to be able to shine in such an intimate way when you just don't have people to hide behind. And I just think that's something that's definitely very solid when it comes to Bug, and something that's always important that the Fangs and Infernos hear and kind of take into their brains, when they're watching this movie. So that's the way it's going to be, Fangs and Infernos. Like I said, victory to the devil in the Phobia showdown, as with a 7.5, Bug takes out Arachnophobia at a 7.0. Fangs and Infernos, we appreciate you guys. We love you guys. You make the wheels go round on this show, and we love all of your love and support. And speaking of love and support, make sure that you guys are showing love and support to our partners and sponsors of the Vampire and Devil podcast, and show them all the love. Great materials, great things to drink like Brutalities, awesome stuff to go visit like the Salem Witchboard Museum, as well as the Baltimore Witchboard Museum, and of course get all of your shopping done of Vampire and Devil merch through our friends Mark and Lizzie at Rockin' Horror Apparel at rockinhorror.com. We love you guys. We'll see you soon. Horns up. Fangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some Brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll, Brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the tea and you like the Brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampire and Devil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh, yeah. You want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampire and Devil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampire and Devil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities.
Hey. It's the devil here again, and we're gonna talk about more of those 90s horror comedies that you love. And this time we're going to 1994 with a little bit of a serial killer mother. We're talking about Serial Mom. Oh, who loves this movie? Who doesn't love a mom that loves to cook? Who loves to kill? Who loves to make the motherfucker squeal? Oh yeah, this movie is funny. It's got everything that you want. It's got, death. It's got crime. It's got Matthew Lillard. Ooh, yeah, Matthew Lillard. Oh, Scooby-Doo himself. Anyway, this movie is a howling good time. I think you should check it out. Go check out 1994's Serial Mom before she comes over to your house and makes you for dinner.
Ghouls and Fangs, Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe. We've got John Waters. But what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history. He's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And, you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore. So all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away, going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out, you know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you got to check it out because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bazaar Oddities shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.